In this video I'm gonna show you how to build a very simple ASP.NET Core Blazor server web application and publish it to the Microsoft Azure cloud, so that at the end of it you'll have an overview on how to do that. So before we get started, I'll just show you the end result, which is this. So you see we have a table showing a very simple post model with just a few properties. If I hit create, you see we can create a new post, and I'll just fill in some dummy data. Alright, create. And then we come back to the index page and see our post has been added to the database. If I hit F5, you'll see it's still there. Okay, and let's update this post. So I'll hit update. And I'll just add updated to the fields. Alright, and then I'll hit update. Awesome, and we go back to the index page and we see the fields have been updated. Lastly, I'll delete this post, and then we see it's deleted from the database. So in this tutorial I'll show you how to build this little CRUD app and how to get it up and running in Azure. You can download the source code created in this tutorial for free via the link in the description below. I'll also add links to the sources I used. So I'm Ruben, and it's my goal to help people learn software development in C# and .NET. And I do that by creating educational content about it. This tutorial is basically version 2 of a tutorial I did a few months ago. But there were a few mistakes in there, so I figured it'd be nice to create a second iteration where I show the correct way to do things. So for the technologies we'll use the .NET 6 LTS version, C#10, Visual Studio 2022 Preview, ASP.NET Core Blazor Server, Entity Framework Core, SQLite, Bootstrap for the UI, and Microsoft Azure, because we'll be publishing this application to a free tier Azure App Service resource. This tutorial is just a quick overview. If you want a full explanation of Blazor and surrounding technologies, check out my course linked in the description below. So let's get started. I've challenged myself to do this in 30 minutes, so I'll just start a stopwatch. Okay, with that out of the way, let's start building. So I'm gonna launch Visual Studio. And I'm gonna create a new project. For the template, I'll use Blazor Server App, and I'll name the project Blazor Server. I'll choose my tutorials folder, and I'll name the solution CRUD 30 mins. And I'll leave the checkbox below unchecked. Hit next. Okay, I'm gonna keep the framework .NET 6 LTS. I'm gonna leave authentication to none. I'm gonna keep HTTPS checked and keep Docker unchecked, and then I'll hit create. So I want to start off with the database portion. So we'll be setting up Entity Framework Core and use a code first approach. So I'm gonna right click the Blazor server project and hit manage NuGet packages. And I'm gonna search for Microsoft.Entity Framework Core. And I'm gonna install the latest stable version. And I'll just hit accept. And then I'll also install Microsoft.Entity Framework Core.design. This one, it shows up. And accept. And I'm gonna scroll down a bit and also install SQLite, Microsoft Entity Framework Core SQLite. And accept that. Okay, and that's all the NuGet packages we'll need for this tutorial. So I'll close all the tabs. DB context. So I'm gonna right click the data folder, add a class, and I'm gonna name it CRUD 30 mins DB context. And the first thing I'll do is zoom in for the people watching on their phones. And I'm gonna change this class to internal sealed. And I'm just gonna add a semicolon to the namespace and remove the curly braces. Hit Ctrl KD. And there we go. Okay, so let's first of all inherit from db context. And I'll Alt Enter, import the correct using statement. Right, and I'll save this. And now I'll just create one simple model class to work with. So I'm gonna right click data again, add a class, and I'm gonna name it post. And again, I'll make the class internal sealed and add a semicolon to the namespace, remove the curly braces, hit Ctrl KD, and then I'll add the properties. So I'll just start off with a data annotation of key. So this is the primary key. Then I'll hit prop, tab, public int, post ID. Then I'll add another annotation, make this required, and give it a max length of 200, and then hit prop again. And I'm going to do public string title, and I want to initialize that to string.empty. Then I'll add another required annotation and another max length, and I'm gonna set it to 5000. I'm gonna do another prop, make it a string, and I'm gonna call it content, and I'm also gonna initialize that to string.empty. Okay, that's the model class done. I'll close it. Right, so back in the db context, I'll add a db set of type post. So prop public db set of type post, and I'm gonna name it posts. Then I'll override on configuring, so protected override void on configuring. And that has a parameter of type db context options builder, and I'll just accept the suggested name. And in there we want to call just one line. So I'll use an arrow, and I'll do db context options builder, and I'll zoom out a bit, dot use SQLite, and then we need to pass in the connection string, and that will be data source equals, and I'll just keep the database in the root of the project. So I'll do crud 30mins.db. So there you go. Then I want to seed some data, and we're gonna do that in onModel creating. So let's override that. So I'm gonna do protected override void onModel creating, and that has a parameter of type model builder, and I'll just name it model builder. And for the actual seed data, I'll declare a post array and name it posts to seed. I'm gonna initialize that to a new post array. I'm gonna make the length 6. So we're gonna seed 6 posts. Then I'll do a for loop with 6 iterations. For int I equals 1, I want to start at 1. And as long as I is less than or equal to 6, I want to increment I. And then I want to set the posts to seed at the index of I minus 1 to a new post. And then I'll add curly braces and fill in the properties when this new post gets created. So I'm gonna set the post ID to I, and I'm gonna set the title to an interpolated string. And for its contents, I'll do post I, right? And I'm gonna set the content to an interpolated string. And I'm gonna say this is post I's content. I have also liked and subscribed. I hope you did. And then to actually seed this data, we'll use model builder dot entity of a generic type post dot has data, and then we'll pass in our posts to seed array. Awesome. So now we're ready to generate the database. So I'll open a terminal by clicking below or going to view terminal, and I'm gonna cd into the Blazor server project. Then I'll run .NET EF migrations add, and I'll name it first migration, and I'm gonna set the output to data/migrations. And look at this data folder. This is where they'll show up. There we go. We have a migrations folder with our first migration in it and a snapshot. And normally you check these, obviously, but I've already tested this tutorial. Right, so now to generate the database, I'll do .NET EF database update, and that will generate a database in the location of the data source we specified. So that will be the project root here. And there we go. And I'm just gonna open it in a Database Explorer software, so DB Browser SQLite, and I'm gonna split the view with Visual Studio and drag and drop the database in there. Awesome, so we see it has 3 tables. So I'm just gonna left click browse data, and in the posts table we see that our seed data is in there, so we're ready to proceed. So I'll close this Database Explorer, maximize Visual Studio again. Right, so our next step is to display all the posts in the UI. And I'll first add some namespaces to imports.razor. We'll be using a lot, so that all our components don't need to have separate using statements for them. So I'll open it and add, so I'll just duplicate this line, and I'm gonna do Blazor server.data, and I'll also do using Microsoft.Entity Framework Core. Awesome, so now I want to display all the posts on the index page. So I'm gonna close all the tabs, and I'm gonna open Pages Index, and I'm gonna delete everything below page title, and then I'll start with the code. So add code, and let's start by declaring a variable to store all the posts in. So a private list of type post, and I'll name it _posts, and I'll initialize it to null. Then we actually want to get all the posts from the database, and we'll do that in the onInitialized async lifecycle method. So I'm gonna do protected override, so then the IntelliSense shows all the lifecycle methods. And I'm gonna go for onInitialized async, and I'm gonna change it to protected override async task. And we don't need the base. Then I want to get a new instance of our DB context. And according to the Microsoft docs, this is the correct way to do it in Blazor server. One of the ways. This is the simplest way, I believe. I'm gonna do using var context, and that equals a new CRUD 30min DB context. and I believe the garbage collection will automatically clean it up for us in this if we use it this way. Right, and then I'm just gonna set the underscore posts to await context dot posts, and then we're gonna do toList async. All right, there we go. So let's display the posts now. So I'm gonna do add if. I'm gonna check if the underscore posts equals null. And if it's null, I'll just display a heading saying loading. Else, I'm gonna do a for each. And I'm gonna do for each var post in our underscore posts. And then I'll just display a heading with the add post dot title. Awesome. So now I want to start a project to see if everything works. So I'll just hit this start without debugging button. And there we go. We see all our posts. So I'm gonna open my browser and Visual Studio side by side. And I want to continue developing this and see my changes live in the browser using the new hot reload feature, which is awesome. So I'll click the little flame drop down and make sure hot reload on file save is checked. Then I'll just put my cursor on the edge here and drag that blue bar all the way to the right. Okay, so next up, I want to improve this display code. And I'll zoom in as much as possible for people watching on their phones. So I want to display the posts in a Bootstrap table and add some other stuff. So I'll just delete all this. And I'm gonna do an H1. And I'll just give it the title of the tutorial. So CRUD 30 mins, save that. And the hot reload should pick this up now. And there we go. So I'll start with the create button to create a new post. So I'm gonna do a link, so an A tag, and I'll set the href to /create. And I'm gonna give it a few classes. So I'm gonna do btn success, and btn large, and w100, and margin y4. Save that, and I'll just give it the text of plus create. Okay, there we go. Then I want to add a table to display the posts in. So I'll do table, and I'm gonna give that a few classes. So table responsive, and table striped. And then I'm gonna add a t-head, and in there a tr, so table row, and then a th, if it works. Yeah. I'm gonna set the scope to call, and this one will be for the ID, and I'll just add parentheses primary key, duplicate that, Ctrl D, and change it to title, duplicate, change it to content, duplicate, change it to CRUD. Okay, there we go. Then I'm gonna add the t-body, and then I'm gonna do an add if. So if the underscore posts isn't null, then I want to do a for each. So for each var post in posts, I want to add a table row, right? I'm gonna add a th for that and set the scope to row. And that's gonna be the post dot post ID. I'm gonna duplicate that and change it to be a td and remove the scope. And I'm gonna set that to post.title, duplicate that, change it to post.content, duplicate that, remove the dynamic data, and I'll just hit enter inside to go to a new line. Then we're gonna add a link tag. So I'm gonna set the href to /update /add post post ID, and I'm gonna give that a few classes. So btn, btn warning, btn large, w100, and margin y2. And I'm just gonna open that up, and I'm gonna give it a text of update, and let's just save to see how we're doing. Okay, awesome, we already see the posts. Then I'll add another button for delete, so button, and for the class I'll do btn danger, and btn large, and w100, and margin y2, and I'll just give it the text of delete. Save that. There we go. So that's our table. Looks good to me. So now I want to implement the delete feature. So I'll go down to the code. Below uninitialized async, I'm gonna do private async task, and I'll name it delete post async. And that's gonna take in a parameter of type post, and I'll name it post to delete. And again, I'll just copy this line using var context. We're gonna need our db context and sum things up with the Razor code editor, I believe. So I'll just restart Visual Studio real quick. Okay, and that fixed it. I'll just run it again, start without debugging. So then I'm gonna do context.posts.remove, and I want to remove the post to delete. And then I'm gonna do if await context.savechanges async, and if the result of that is more than 0, the changes have been successfully persisted to the database. Then I'll just remove the posts from our list in memory here. So posts.remove, and then we'll remove the post to delete. Else, so this failed, we couldn't persist to the database, then we'll display a JavaScript alert box with some error text, but we first need to inject the JavaScript runtime for that. So above add code, I'll do add inject, and I'll inject the IJS runtime, and I'll name it JS runtime. No semicolon, right? So then here I want to declare a string, and I'll name it error message, and that equals a interpolated string. I'm just gonna set it to error failed to delete post, and then I'll add quotes for it, and then pass in the post to delete dot title. Okay, there we go. And then I'll do await JS runtime, and I'm gonna wanna invoke void async, and we're gonna invoke the built-in alert function and pass in the error message. And we get a little pop-up that hot reload can't automatically apply these changes. So I'm just gonna tick always rebuild when this happens and hit rebuild and apply. And I see there were errors. So I don't want to continue and run the latest. So I think I made a typo. Alright, invoke void async. Yeah, there we go. So let's now call this method when the delete button is clicked. So on the delete button, I'll add a add on click event handler, and when it's clicked, I'll do a lambda and call delete post async and pass in the post of the current for each iteration. If I now hit delete, there we go. We see the post is gone. I'll just refresh to see if it's really gone. Yeah, so that has been persisted to the database. Awesome. So next up, I want to work on the create feature. So I'm gonna right click pages, add a Razor component, and I'm gonna name it create. And I'm gonna start by giving this a page directive. So add page / create. And then I'll add the code for the logic. So I'm gonna inject the IJS runtime again, call it JS runtime. And I'm also gonna inject the navigation manager, and I'll give that the same name. All right, so that's how we can navigate in the browser with our C# code. Then I'm gonna declare a private post. I'm gonna name that _post to create and initialize it to a new post. Add curly braces, semicolon. I'm gonna set the title to just post title, and I'm gonna set the content to post content. Right, and then I also want to declare another method. So private async task create post async, and this will add it to the database. Then we're gonna need a context again. So I'm gonna do using for context equals a new CRUD 30min db context, and then I want to await the context.posts.add async and pass in the post to create. And if the await context.save changes async, but I'll actually copy and paste that from index delete post async, because this is gonna be kind of exactly the same, mostly the same. So if it worked, I want to do navigation manager dot navigate to, and then we'll navigate to /, which will just be the index page. And if it failed, I want to do set the error message to error failed to create post. That's enough information, and the rest can stay the same. Okay, let's now add the display code, and we'll be using the built-in edit form. So I'll just first add a heading 1 and give it the text of creating post, and then the add _post to create dot title, and I'll just navigate to create now, and there we go. And then I'll add a edit form. Did I mess something up? Then I'll add a edit form component, and for the model parameter I'm gonna pass in the post to create, and on valid submit I want to call create post async, and that will automatically, you know, kind of pass in this post to create model. Then I want to add a div with a class of form-group and margin bottom 3. And I'm gonna add a label, and it's gonna be for the post title, and give the text of title. And then I want to add an input text component, make it self-closing, and I'm gonna set the add bind dash value to the post to create dot title, and I'm gonna give that a class of form-control, and I'm gonna give that an ID of post title. You know, the label is for this input element with an ID of post title. Right, this input text just is an input element, right? Okay, so that's added, and I'll copy and paste it for the content. So I'll just change the for to post content, copy and paste that to the input text, and I'll change the text here to content and bind the value to the content, and that will work. And then I also want to add a data annotations validator and display a validation summary. All right, and then for the submit and cancel buttons, I'll add a button and give it a class of btn success and make it of type submit, and I'm gonna give it a text of create. There we go, and I'll just copy and paste this button, and for this one I'm gonna set the add on click to a lambda, and in the lambda we'll call navigation manager dot navigate to, and we'll navigate to slash, right, so to the root, and we need to wrap this in an add and then an opening parentheses and a closing parentheses to specify that what happens inside that is all C# code. And I'm gonna change the class to be btn secondary and remove the type. And for the text I'm gonna do cancel. Okay, let's save that. Okay, so this should work. I'll just go back to the index page, and Hold Reload picked everything up, so that's nice. So if I hit the create button now, we'll go to the create page, and if I just hit create for this, we'll go back to the index page and the created post shows up. And I'll just refresh the page to verify that it's added to the database. Awesome. Then lastly, I want to add the update feature, and update is very similar to create, so I'll just copy and paste that component. So create, Ctrl+C, Ctrl+V, gonna put my cursor on it, hit F2 to rename, and I'll name it to update, hit enter to open it. Right, so let's speed things up by using Visual Studio's find and replace features. So I'll hit Ctrl F, set it to current document and match casing, so that needs to be on. And I want to find lowercase create, hit tab to replace that with lowercase update. Then I'll hit Alt A to replace all, and there we go. And I also want to do that for capital create and replace it with capital update. Hit Alt A, 9 occurrences, so that's awesome. It saves us a bit of typing. I'll just do the rest of the changes manually. So in the page directive, I also want to add a parameter for the post ID. So I'll do slash and curly braces, and I'll pass in the post ID and specify with a colon that it's of type int. Okay, and let's add this parameter to the code. So I'm gonna do brackets parameter, and that's gonna be a public int, and it needs to be the same name as in the route here. So copy and paste that and add a get and a set. So it's a property. And instead of initializing the post to update to a new one, we'll initialize it to null. Then in the lifecycle method on parameter set async, we'll get this post from the database. So I'll do protected override void, and then on parameter set, but I'm gonna change it to protected override async task, and then on parameter set async, and remove this base call. And again, we're gonna need the DB context, so I'll just copy and paste it. Then I want to set the post to update to await context dot posts dot find async, and I want to find the post ID. So just copy and paste that. Right, so then in update post async, the only thing I want to change is the add async to update. So I'll double click that, set it to update, and remove the await because this is not asynchronous. If we now hit update, it should work. Nice, it opens up. And I'll just update the title and content. So updated and updated. I hit update. And there we go. We're back on the index and we see that the post is updated. Awesome, so our little CRUD application is complete. Let's publish it to Azure. And we're gonna do that straight from Visual Studio. So I'll close my browser and maximize Visual Studio, and I'll first of all want to specify that the database files should be sent up to Azure. So I'll just close all the tabs, and I'm gonna select the .db file and the two little helper files, and you can right click them and hit properties if this window isn't open yet. And then I'm gonna set the copy to output directory to copy always and save all. Okay, so let's publish Blazor server to a free tier Azure App Service now. So I'm gonna right click it, hit publish, and I'm gonna select Azure, hit next, and I'm gonna select Azure App Service Windows, hit next. I want to create a new app service, so I'll hit the little green plus button, and I'm gonna change the name to the solution name, so CRUD 30 mins. I'm just gonna copy that to my clipboard, and I'm gonna select my tutorials resource group, and I'm gonna create a new hosting plan for this. So I'll hit new, and for the name I'll just type ASP- for like the app service plan, but here it's called hosting plan, but in the portal you'll see app service plan. And then I'll paste the app service name, and I'm gonna keep West Europe for the location and change the size to 3. Then I'll hit OK and hit create. And I'll just speed up the video while Microsoft creates this resource for us. And then I'll hit finish. And then to start the publishing, I'll hit publish. And now I'll speed up the video while our CRUD app is being published to Azure. Awesome, and then a browser window opens up. So the publish completed successfully, and I'll just test it real quick. So I'll just hit create. I'll just add test. And there we go. it's added. Then I'll update this one and I'll just do test updated, update that, and there we go. And lastly, I'll delete it. And awesome, we see it's deleted. Right, so it's running in Azure now. There's one final thing to do. So I'll just close my browser, go back to Visual Studio, and I'm gonna set the database and the helper files back to do not copy. I'll just hit publish again. This makes it so that our production database doesn't get overwritten by our development database, which is nice. So the publish is done and a browser window pops up, and as you can see it's still the same database, so it didn't get overwritten by the local one. Awesome, there you go. That's how you build a very simple ASP.NET Core Blazor server web application with the CRUD operations hosted in the cloud. Let's check how long it took. Alright, it's a bit longer than 30 minutes, but maybe the video after the edit will be 35-40 minutes. I don't know. Nah, decent, not 30 minutes, but decent. Alright, so that's it for today. I wish you happy holidays and a happy new year. Thanks for watching. I hope this video was useful to you. Make sure you like and subscribe because it helps the channel grow. You can download source code and other resources from the description below. I want to thank all Patreon supporters for making this video possible. If you're not already one, I hope you'll consider becoming one, because these videos take quite a long time to make and unfortunately you can't pay rent with goodwill. And lastly, I invite you to join our Discord community. Here you can have a friendly chat with other developers and get help if you're stuck on something. You can find all the links in the description below. That's all from me. Good luck in your developer journey.